Hi, it's Jo again. So tonight I said I'd do a little bit about the history of vampires. What I'm going to do is kind of it'll be about 5, hopefully under 10 minutes. Let's go through a little bit about where they come from around the world. And then I've got some notes because I'm still pretty nervous doing this. And then a little bit about some more recent events with vampires. And then where they first appeared in UK literature. So interestingly enough, vampires have been around for thousands of years, and the first written texts were in the ancient Sanskrits of India. So they had lots of different types of vampires in India in their legends, but so the Sanskrits were the first texts written down, and one of the most famous ones, which was translated, was translated in the late 1800s by Richard F. Burton, and this was called Vikram and the Vampire. You can get it quite easily today. About 20 years ago, when I first started researching this, it was really hard to find any information. Richard F. Burton as well, he was quite a character because he was around, like I said, in the late 1800s. And he was the man who translated the Tales from the Arabian Nights and also the Kama Sutra. So he was a bit of a guy in his day, because Victorian Britain was very prude. So that was the first translation from the ancient Sanskrits that we had in this country. If we move to Greece and Rome, the vampires here were more seen as ghouls than humans or walking dead. Most of our concept of the vampire comes from Eastern Europe, although vampires have their origins all around the globe, from Australia, North, Central and South America, Africa, and they date back thousands of years, but they all have their own versions of the vampire. In Europe in the 1700s, there were vampire epidemics, and people really did live in fear of the dead rising. This was partly due to the fact, and this is probably more gruesome than the belief in vampires, I think, that there were occasions that people were buried alive. So if someone was suspected of rising from the dead, when they would exhume the body, they found inside the coffin scratch marks. So people were literally buried alive, and this sort of aided the belief in the walking dead back then, vampires. But modern scientists examined this evidence, I think it was in the 70s, and they saw these coffins from the 1700s with scratch marks. But later, I think in the 1800s, they were said, it's a bit of an urban legend, that they had a bell above a coffin with a string going inside, so if a person was accidentally pronounced dead but yet they weren't dead, they could ring the bell, and it said that this is where Saved by the Bell comes from. So that's kind of pretty gruesome, isn't it? Get cremated. That's what I think. I think that's why, yeah, because I saw that like years ago on a program, and I thought, yeah, definitely. But it also makes me think of Kill Bill, because in Kill Bill she gets buried alive, but of course she does kung fu, so it's why you should also do martial arts. She breaks out of it. So it's quite interesting. In the 1700s, a real rife belief in vampires, but thinking of them as the walking dead. In some parts of Romania, and possibly other areas of Eastern Europe as well, the belief in vampires to date is still very strong. And that was one thing I wanted to say about today. There was a case some years ago about a man that had died and who was suspected, it wasn't that many years ago, I think about 2005, he was suspected of being a vampire. So there's a village, and it's really remote in Romania, and what they did is they exhumed the body, they split his rib cage, and they took out his heart, which they burnt, put stakes through his body and scattered it with garlic. you can see this. I can put a link to this if you're interested. I saw a program on it last year with a reporter that went there. I think I've seen a couple actually, and it's, you know, it's not something I'd take the mickey out of, because for these people, they live very remotely and it's a very real fear. But it's very interesting that, you know, that fear, that belief is still present in our modern day society. Out there as well, they use herbs, not just garlic, which they plant alongside a body. Especially in the program I saw, a man had died, but he lived very remotely, so there was no hallowed ground. So, and they actually asked the reporter to do this, and he had to plant verbena. You've probably heard of verbena, because I remembered it and I made a note of it. I thought, I'll put it in my, oh, hi Jamie, it's nice to see you. I've actually got lemon verbena in my garden, and I thought, oh, that's quite interesting, isn't it? So they actually asked this reporter to plant verbena around this guy's body so he wouldn't rise up and be a, you know, become a vampire. But the other thing they use as well is vervain, and I thought that was interesting, because vervain's found in a lot of natural remedies for sleep that, you know, some of us have all used. And funnily enough, I use something called Pet Remedy, because I've got 4 cats, and they can get quite stressed because we live in a little cottage. And vervain is also a sedative. We won't obviously get vampires here, which is a bit gutting really. I'm not going to meet mine because my house stinks of vervain. But they use vervain and verbena in Romania to this day, so quite interesting. Now, you've probably heard of the word or the name Strigoi. I want to say Strigoi, and that's the Romanian word for vampire. But there's more sort of what have I written? Ghoul, yeah, more troubled spirits or ghoulish in nature. And I was very inspired by the Eastern European vampire from the film Nosferatu. So in my book 1, where Anthony gets attacked by those kind of zombie type vampires, that was totally taken from the idea of Eastern European vampires. And I was always going to put a tagline on there that not all vampires are created equal, because there's so many different types. But that was totally my feeling with it, you know, when I did that. So interestingly though, Strigoi were the inspiration behind Bram Stoker's Dracula. In the UK, our first vampire novel written was by Polidori. I did actually have the date for that earlier. I've got it here, actually, if I have a little look, in 1819. And I've got a little, my friend got me this for my birthday. You can see here, you can get it. I really recommend reading it. I actually read it some years ago, but it was written in 1819. It's very slow, but that was the first one. And then after that, we had Feast of Blood. Varney the Vampire. And then the next one after that was Carmilla, which I actually had the date for that as well here, 1872. And that was the first Gothic fiction that featured a female vampire. I've not read Carmilla, actually. I should pick it up because, you know, I write about vampires. I feel it's kind of, I ought to know about all of this. So Dracula came much later. And if you haven't read Dracula, you must read it. It's really, really good. It's eerie and creepy. It's not outright scary. But a word of warning, I read in bed, and it's not one to read in bed. You read it and you'll think, oh, you know, it's not scary. But when you sleep, you'll have the worst dreams you can imagine. So perhaps read it in the day, really. But definitely read Dracula. It's absolutely fantastic. You'll be surprised. Even though it was written a long time ago, it's really, really good. Of course, there were vampire tales and what was known as the Penny Dreadfuls. And this is actually where Feast of Blood, Varney the Vampire first appeared. So you've probably heard of the series Penny Dreadful. They were little literature weekly stories which you'd buy for a penny, and they became very popular. And something I found today, just checking up on my research, was from the, I think it's, I've got it here, it's from the British Library. And it's a missing chapter from Dracula. So what if I could do, it's quite long because it is a chapter, it's about 10 pages to print it out. I thought what I could do is I will read that in chunks, and perhaps I could do that weekly, just read a little bit of that. If you're interested in that, let me know, because that's something I could totally do. And also if I do, like if I start it next week, it gives me a week to go through some of it, because obviously it's going to go over a period of weeks because it's a whole chapter. But if you've read Dracula, that will be really interesting. But if you're not, I'll just do it on video and then I'll just post it. But I'll probably still do it in chunks because I'd imagine it might be 20 minutes or something. So yeah, let me know if you're interested. If not, I'll do something else next week. I might do the Nephilim next week if you're interested, because I've written about them and I researched them a lot. So I could do that. But if you've got any suggestions, anything you want me to chat about and research, if I've written about it, I will have researched it, then that'll be cool. But that's me. Thanks ever so much, guys. I see there's 4 of you join me. That's really cool. I hope you found that interesting. If you want me to post the link about the modern story about the Romanian village, then give me a shout on here and I'll find that, because you know it's quite easy to find. It was on a programme, I think it was BBC, but it might have been BBC4, but you can watch it online. I watched it on my computer. I really watch TV. But I can see if I can find it and post the link if you want. It's really interesting. But other than that, I hope you had a fab Halloween, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.